In the small town of Ichaya, nestled between rolling hills and golden fields, a young girl named Nomsa lived with her father. Life had not been the same since her mother passed away. Their once joyful home now felt cold and empty. Nomsa missed her mother's warm embrace, her gentle voice, and the way she made everything feel safe. But when her father told her he was getting remarried, a spark of hope flickered in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, this new woman, Zinle, would bring back the love that had been missing. When Zinle arrived with her daughter Lerato, Nomsa tried her best to welcome them with an open heart. She wanted a mother's love again, a sister to share secrets and laughter with. But from the moment they stepped into the house, she felt something was wrong. Zinle barely looked at her, and when she did, there was no warmth in her eyes, only a cold, sharp gaze. Lerato, instead of treating her like a new sister, smirked at her, as if she already knew she was more important. At first, Nomsa convinced herself that things would get better. Maybe they just needed time to adjust. But that hope shattered quickly. Within days, Zinle started treating her differently. She spoke to Nomsa only when giving orders. Clean the floors, Nomsa. Wash the dishes, Nomsa. Take care of Lerato's laundry. It wasn't long before Nomsa realized she was no longer a daughter in her own home. She had become a servant. Lerato, on the other hand, was treated like a princess. She got new clothes, delicious meals, and all of Zinle's attention. When Thabo was around, Zinle would act kind, pretending to care for Nomsa. She would stroke her hair, ask her how she was doing, and even call her my child. But the moment he left, her kindness disappeared like smoke in the wind. Nomsa wanted to tell her father, to make him see the truth, but how could she? Every time she tried, Zinle would put on her fake smile, making it seem like she was a loving mother. And Thabo, blinded by love, never noticed Nomsa's pain. She had lost her mother, and now she felt like she was losing her father too. The home that once held warmth and laughter had turned into a place of suffering. Nomsa had hoped for love, but instead, she found only pain. And deep inside, a terrible fear crept into her heart. This was only the beginning. Life in Ichaya had changed completely for Nomsa. She was no longer the happy girl who once believed in family, love, and kindness. Every morning, before the sun even rose, she was already awake, sweeping the floors, washing the dishes, and preparing breakfast. Her hands, once soft, were now rough from scrubbing. Her back ached, and her feet burned from standing too long. Yet no one seemed to care. Zinle, her stepmother, had made it clear. Nomsa was nothing more than a servant in this house. But when her father, Thabo, was around, Zinle played the perfect mother. She would smile at Nomsa and say, "My child, did you sleep well?" Or, "You must be tired, come and rest." But the moment Thabo left, her kindness disappeared like smoke in the wind. Lerato, on the other hand, lived like a princess. She never lifted a finger. While Nomsa washed the dishes, Lerato sat on the couch, painting her nails. While Nomsa scrubbed the floors, Lerato scrolled through her phone, laughing at silly videos. And while Nomsa ate cold leftovers, if she was lucky, Lerato enjoyed hot meals, fresh fruits, and sweet treats. Zinle spoiled Lerato with the finest things. She bought her new dresses, expensive shoes, and golden jewelry. But for Nomsa, not even a single new dress. She wore her old, torn clothes, growing smaller on her thin body. If she dared to ask for anything, Zinle would snap. "You should be grateful we let you live here." Nomsa tried to tell her father, but every time she got the courage to speak, Zinle found a way to stop her. She would act like the most loving wife and mother, pretending to care for Nomsa in front of him. And Thabo, blinded by love, believed everything he saw. One evening, after finishing all her chores, Nomsa sat outside, staring at the dark sky. She hugged her knees and let silent tears fall. She missed her mother. She missed the days when she was treated like a daughter, not a slave. Her stomach growled with hunger, but she knew better than to ask for food. Inside the house, laughter echoed. Lerato and Zinle were enjoying a delicious meal, talking and laughing as if Nomsa didn't exist. The smell of grilled chicken and warm bread filled the air, making her hunger even worse. Suddenly, the door opened, and Zinle stepped out. She glared at Nomsa and tossed a small plate on the ground. It had nothing but a few dry crumbs. "Eat," she said coldly, before slamming the door shut. Nomsa stared at the crumbs, tears welling up in her eyes. She wanted to scream, to fight, to tell her father the truth, but deep inside, she knew no one was coming to save her. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a prison, and she was trapped. Nomsa sat on the cold kitchen floor, her hands red and sore from scrubbing. She could hear the sound of laughter coming from the living room, Zinle and Lerato, enjoying their evening without a care in the world. Her stomach growled, but she knew better than to ask for food. She had learned her lesson many times before. Her father, Thabo, was her only hope. He was the only person who could save her from this misery. But the problem was, he didn't know. He didn't see the truth. Zinle was clever. She had turned their home into a place of lies, where she played the role of a loving mother whenever Thabo was around. She spoke sweetly to Nomsa, pretending to care. "My child, are you okay?" she would ask in front of him. "Did you eat enough? You worked too hard. Come and rest." She even touched Nomsa's face gently, pretending to be a caring mother. But the moment Thabo left for work, her true colors showed. "Lazy girl, stop standing there. Get to work," she would snap. She made Nomsa do all the cleaning, cooking and laundry, while Lerato did nothing but enjoy her life. Nomsa tried to tell her father once. One evening, when Thabo was sitting on the couch reading the newspaper, she gathered all her courage and spoke. "Baba, I need to talk to you." Her voice trembled, but she knew she had to try. Thabo looked up and smiled. "Of course, my child. What is it?" Before Nomsa could say another word, Zinle rushed in with a bright smile. "Oh, Nomsa, you work too hard. Come here, my girl." She pulled Nomsa close, wrapping her arm around her shoulders. Nomsa froze, feeling Zinle's sharp nails digging into her skin. "This child is so hard-working, my love," Zinle continued, looking at Thabo. "She helps me so much. I don't know what I would do without her." Thabo's face softened with pride. He looked at Nomsa with love. "That's my girl. I'm so proud of you." Nomsa felt tears burning in her eyes. This was not what she wanted to say. This was not what she wanted him to believe. But Zinle had already won. She had made Nomsa look like the perfect, obedient daughter, and Thabo had fallen for it. Later that night, after Thabo went to bed, Zinle's sweet act disappeared. She grabbed Nomsa by the arm and whispered harshly, "If you ever try to tell him anything again, you will regret it." Nomsa's heart pounded in fear. She was trapped in a world where no one could see her pain. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Thabo remained blind to the truth. He believed that his new wife was a blessing, and that his daughter was happy. Every time he was home, Zinle made sure Nomsa smiled, made sure she acted as if nothing was wrong. And Nomsa, scared of what would happen if she didn't, played along. But deep inside, she was dying. She wanted to scream, to shake her father, to beg him to open his eyes. Couldn't he see how thin she was getting? Didn't he notice how tired she always looked? But Thabo was too in love with Zinle to question anything. One day, as Nomsa was washing clothes outside, she saw her father leaving for work. He turned back, smiled at her, and waved. "Be good, my child." Nomsa forced a smile, and waved back. But as he disappeared down the road, her smile faded. She was all alone again, and no one, not even her own father, could see her suffering. Nomsa's life in Ikaya was no longer just unfair, it had become unbearable. Each day felt like a punishment, each night a silent battle with hunger and pain. Zinle's cruelty had started with small things, making her do all the housework while Lerato rested, giving her old clothes while buying new ones for her daughter. But now, it was worse, much worse. One evening, Nomsa accidentally broke a plate while washing the dishes. Her hands were tired, her body weak, and the plate slipped from her fingers, crashing onto the floor. She froze, her heart pounding in fear. Zinle stormed into the kitchen, her face twisted in rage. "You stupid, careless girl," she shouted. "Do you know how expensive that plate was?" "I'm sorry, Mama Zinle," Nomsa whispered, her voice shaking. But Zinle didn't care about apologies. As punishment, she took away Nomsa's dinner, while Thabo, Lerato, and Zinle ate a delicious meal of chicken and warm bread. Nomsa sat outside on the cold ground, her stomach empty and aching. And that was just the beginning. Zinle started punishing Nomsa for the smallest mistakes. If she forgot to sweep one corner of the house, she wouldn't be allowed to eat. If she didn't wash Lerato's clothes properly, she had to sleep on the floor without a blanket. If she looked sad in front of Thabo, Zinle would whisper a warning in her ear, reminding her what would happen if she tried to complain. One day, Thabo announced that the family would be attending a big wedding in town. It was the kind of event Nomsa loved: music, dancing, and beautiful dresses. She was excited, but Xinlei had other plans. The night before the wedding, she handed Nomsa a long list of chores. "You won't be going anywhere," she said coldly. "Stay here and clean the house." Nomsa's heart dropped. "But Baba said I could go," she said softly, trying not to cry. Xinlei laughed. "Your father doesn't make the rules here. I do." The next morning, Nomsa watched as Xinlei, Lerato, and Thabo left, dressed in their finest clothes. Thabo waved at her. "Be good, my child," he said before walking away, completely unaware of her pain. As soon as they were gone, Nomsa sat on the floor, tears streaming down her face. She had never felt so alone. That night, when they returned, Lerato laughed as she showed off her new dress and told stories about the fun she had. Nomsa pretended not to care, but inside, her heart was breaking. Days turned into weeks, and the cruelty only grew worse. The hunger, the punishments, the loneliness. It was all becoming too much. She lay on the hard floor at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if things would ever change. She had no one, no voice, no escape, and deep inside, she feared that this nightmare would never end. Nomsa sat alone in the dark, hugging her knees. The cold floor beneath her felt like ice, but she had no blanket, no pillow, just emptiness and pain. Her stomach growled with hunger, but she was used to it by now. She had lost count of the number of nights she had gone to bed without eating. She could not take it anymore. She had tried to be strong. She had tried to be patient, hoping her father would see the truth. But Thabo was blind, and Xinlei's cruelty only grew worse. Nomsa was no longer just a servant. She was a prisoner in her own home. She had to leave. The thought had been in her mind for days. At first it scared her. Where would she go? Who would help her? But the more she suffered, the more she realized anywhere was better than here. Late that night, while the house was silent, Nomsa made her move. She tiptoed toward the door, careful not to make a sound. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared it would wake Xinlei. With shaking hands, she unlatched the door. A rush of cool night air touched her skin, making her feel alive for the first time in months. She stepped outside, her bare feet touching the soft earth. The sky was full of stars, shining down as if guiding her to freedom. She took one step, then another, a few more steps, and she would be free. But just as she was about to run, a voice sliced through the night like a knife. "Where do you think you're going?" Nomsa froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned slowly and saw Xinlei standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, her eyes burning with rage. Before Nomsa could react, Xinlei grabbed her by the arm and dragged her back inside. The door slammed shut, trapping her once again. "You think you can run away from me?" Xinlei hissed. "Ungrateful girl. After everything I've done for you." Nomsa wanted to scream. "You've done nothing but hurt me." But she knew better than to speak. Speaking would only make things worse. Xinlei's punishments were worse than ever that night. She took away the little food Nomsa was allowed to eat. She forced her to scrub the floors until her hands bled. And the worst part, she made her sleep outside like a stray dog, the cold wind biting into her skin. As Nomsa lay there, shivering, she felt something break inside her. It was not just sadness anymore. It was hopelessness. She had tried to escape, and she had failed. She was trapped, and now she feared she would never be free. Nomsa's body had been giving her warnings for weeks. Weakness, dizziness, pain, but she had ignored them. She had no choice. Xinlei didn't care if she was tired. Lerato didn't care if she was hungry. And her father, the only person who could save her, didn't know the truth. But now, she could feel it. This was different. This wasn't just hunger or exhaustion. This was something worse. It started early in the morning when she tried to lift a bucket of water from the well. Her arms shook, her legs felt heavy, and her head spun. She blinked, trying to focus, but everything around her blurred. The bucket slipped from her hands, crashing onto the ground, water spilling everywhere. Then, darkness. The next thing she knew, she was lying on the ground, her face pressed against the hard dirt. Her body refused to move. Her chest rose and fell in short, painful gasps. Xinlei's angry voice pierced the silence. "What is wrong with you, stupid girl?" Nomsa tried to answer, but her lips were too dry. Her throat felt like fire. Xinlei marched toward her, her heels clicking against the ground. She looked down at Nomsa, disgust in her eyes. "You're pretending to be sick, aren't you? You think this will get you out of work?" Nomsa wanted to say no. She wanted to tell Xinlei that she wasn't pretending, that she felt like she was dying, but the words never came. Lerato appeared beside her mother, arms crossed, rolling her eyes. "She's so dramatic," she said, "always looking for attention." Zinle smirked. "Let's see how long she lasts without food." Then she turned and walked away, leaving Nomsa on the ground. Lerato followed, laughing. Nomsa curled into herself, her body shaking. Hours passed. The sun burned her skin, then disappeared behind the clouds. The air grew cold, but she had no strength to move. Inside the house, the sounds of celebration filled the air. Zinle had invited guests over, and the house was alive with laughter, clinking glasses, and the delicious smell of roasted chicken and fresh bread. Music played loudly, and people clapped and danced. They were celebrating while she lay outside, forgotten. Her stomach twisted in pain. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. Her body was giving up on her. She tried to sit up, but dizziness overtook her, and she collapsed again. The voices from inside the house grew louder. She could hear Zinle laughing, could hear Lerato talking excitedly about her new dress. No one was coming for her. A single tear slipped down Nomsa's cheek. For the first time, she wondered if she was going to die. Nomsa lay on the cold ground, her body too weak to move. The sun had risen high in the sky, but she didn't have the strength to get up. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and her skin burned with fever. The world around her felt distant, as if she were floating between reality and a dream. Inside the house, Zinle and Lerato were still celebrating. The sound of laughter and music echoed through the walls. The smell of delicious food filled the air, making Nomsa's empty stomach twist painfully. She closed her eyes, wishing for an escape, wishing for someone, anyone, to save her. Then, everything changed. A black car pulled up outside the house, its shiny surface reflecting the bright sun. The engine went silent, and a tall, elegant woman stepped out. She wore a long, flowing dress, and her jewelry sparkled in the light. She had an air of confidence and power, the kind of presence that demanded respect. Her name was Makumalo. She was a wealthy woman, known and respected in the town of Ikaya. But more importantly, she had been a close friend of Nomsa's late mother. She had come to visit. Zinle, upon hearing the car, quickly adjusted her dress and fixed her hair before stepping outside with a wide, fake smile. "Makumalo, what a surprise. What brings you here?" Makumalo looked at her with sharp, knowing eyes. "I was passing through and thought I should visit. It has been too long." Zinle laughed nervously. Yes, too long. Please, come inside. Let me prepare tea for you." But Makumalo wasn't interested in tea. As she stepped forward, her sharp eyes scanned the yard. Then she saw her, Nomsa, lying on the ground, her body curled up, her skin pale, her breath shallow. Makumalo's heart clenched. This was Thandi's daughter, the little girl she had once held in her arms, the child of her dear friend. She marched toward Nomsa, ignoring Zinle's attempts to distract her. She knelt beside the girl, gently touching her forehead. Nomsa's skin was burning hot. Fever, malnutrition, exhaustion. Rage boiled in Makumalo's chest. "What is wrong with her?" she demanded, turning to Zinle. Zinle forced a smile. "Oh, Nomsa is always lazy. She refuses to eat, refuses to work properly. I don't know what to do with her." Makumalo's eyes darkened. She had seen enough. She had heard enough. This wasn't laziness. This was abuse. She gently lifted Nomsa's frail body into her arms. The girl was light as a feather, too light, too weak. Zinle's smile faltered. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice uneasy. Makumalo's voice was firm. "I'm taking her inside. She needs food, water, and care, something she clearly hasn't been getting." Zinle opened her mouth to argue, but one look at Makumalo's face made her stop. This was a woman of power, a woman with influence. She couldn't afford to anger her. Inside the house, Makumalo laid Nomsa on the couch. She called for warm water and a blanket. When Zinle hesitated, Makumalo's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Now!" For the first time, Zinle looked afraid. As Nomsa lay on the couch, Makumalo held her hand. "You're safe now, my child," she whispered. "I promise." And for the first time in a long time, Nomsa felt hope. The house was unusually quiet. The sound of celebration had died down, and an uneasy tension filled the air. Makumalo sat in the living room, her face calm, but her eyes burning with anger. Across from her, Zinle sat stiffly, forcing a nervous smile. Lerato played with the edge of her dress, avoiding eye contact. Thabo had just arrived home. He was confused to see Makumalo sitting there, looking as if she owned the house. His wife and stepdaughter sat beside her, looking uncomfortable. Something was wrong. "Makumalo, what a surprise," he said, trying to sound cheerful. "I didn't know you were visiting." Makumalo didn't smile. She looked directly at him, her voice calm but firm. "We need to talk, Thabo." Thabo frowned. "About what?" Makumalo stood up and pointed toward the couch. There, wrapped in a warm blanket, was Nomsa. Her face was pale, her body weak, but she was finally resting. Thabo's eyes widened in shock. "What happened to her?" he asked, stepping closer. "That's what I want to ask you," Makumalo said sharply. "Do you even know what has been happening in your own home?" Thabo turned to Zinle, confusion on his face. "What is she talking about?" Zinle let out a forced laugh. "Oh, it's nothing serious. Nomsa hasn't been feeling well, that's all. She refuses to eat properly, and she's always tired. We've tried to help her, but—" "Lies," Makumalo interrupted. "I found her lying outside, too weak to move. She is sick, Thabo. Not because of an illness, but because of neglect, because of abuse." Thabo's face darkened. "Abuse? What are you saying?" Makumalo's voice was filled with anger now. "I am saying that while you have been working, thinking your daughter is safe, she has been treated worse than a servant. She has been starving while your wife and stepdaughter feast. She has been sleeping on the floor while Lerato enjoys comfort. She has been punished for no reason, humiliated, overworked, and left to suffer." Thabo turned to Zinle, his voice low and dangerous. "Tell me this is not true." Zinle's smile faltered. "Thabo, she's exaggerating. Nomsa is lazy. She refuses to do simple tasks. And she—" "Enough!" Thabo's voice shook the room. For years, he had trusted Zinle. He had believed her when she said she treated Nomsa like her own child. But now looking at his daughter, so thin, so weak, he felt a deep shame. How had he not seen it? How had he been so blind? He turned to Lerato. "And you? You allowed this?" Lerato pouted, crossing her arms. "She's not my real sister. Why should I care?" That was the final straw. Thabo's hands trembled with anger. He had given Zinle and Lerato everything: a home, love, security. And in return, they had tortured his daughter. "Get out," he said coldly. Zinle's eyes widened. "What?" "I said get out of my house. Both of you." Lerato gasped. "Baba, no! Where will we go?" "That is not my problem," Thabo said firmly. "You showed no mercy to my daughter. I will show none to you." Zinle stood, her face red with fury. "You can't do this. I am your wife." "Not anymore." For the first time, Zinle realized he was serious. Panic filled her eyes, but it was too late. Makumalo watched silently as Thabo ordered them to pack their things and leave. She had done what she came to do. Justice had finally been served. As the front door slammed shut behind Zinle and Lerato, Thabo turned back to Makumalo. His eyes were filled with tears. "I failed her," he whispered. Makumalo placed a hand on his shoulder. "You can fix it. But first, she needs love. Real love." Thabo nodded, his heart heavy with guilt. He walked over to Nomsa, kneeling beside her. "My child," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." For the first time in years, Nomsa felt safe. She looked at her father, tears in her eyes. And for the first time, she believed that things might finally change. For the first time in years, Nomsa woke up feeling warm and safe. The softest blanket covered her, and the bed beneath her felt like a cloud. The room smelled of fresh flowers and clean air. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, bathing the room in a golden glow. She was no longer in Zinle's house. She was in Makumalo's home. The last few days had felt like a dream. After her father had thrown Zinle and Lerato out, Makumalo had insisted that Nomsa come with her. Thabo had agreed, knowing that his daughter needed more love and care than he had ever given her. He had promised to visit often and be a better father. But for now, Nomsa needed a fresh start. And that fresh start began here, in the grand home of Makumalo. Nomsa sat up slowly, her body still weak but improving. She was no longer starving. She was no longer forced to sleep on the floor or suffer in silence. Every day, she ate warm, delicious meals. Every day, she was given new clothes, soft to the touch and clean. And most importantly, every day she felt loved. As she stepped out of bed, the door opened and Makumalo entered, smiling warmly. "Good morning, my child. How are you feeling today?" Nomsa smiled back. "Stronger, Ma." Makumalo sat beside her, gently brushing her hair. "That makes me happy, my dear. You are a brave girl. And now, it is time for you to live the life you deserve." Tears filled Nomsa's eyes. I don't know how to thank you. Makumalo held her hands. You don't need to. Just promise me one thing. Promise me that you will never let anyone dim your light again. Nomsa nodded. I promise. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Under Makumalo's care, Nomsa blossomed like a flower that had finally found sunlight. She gained weight, her skin glowed, and her eyes, once filled with sadness, now sparkled with hope. She started school again, something she had once thought was impossible. She made friends, laughed, and learned new things every day. Her teachers were amazed at how intelligent she was, despite all she had been through. One afternoon after school, Nomsa sat with Makumalo in the garden. The air was filled with the sweet scent of roses. Birds chirped happily in the trees. It was peaceful, so different from the life she had lived before. Makumalo looked at her thoughtfully. What do you want to be when you grow up, Nomsa? Nomsa smiled, her heart full of dreams she had once thought were impossible. I want to help children like me. I want to make sure no one ever suffers the way I did. Makumalo's eyes shone with pride. You will, you have a heart full of kindness, and that is more powerful than anything in the world. As the sun set in the distance, Nomsa knew one thing for sure. Love and kindness had saved her, and now she would use that same love and kindness to change the world. Her story had begun with pain, but it would end in victory, because no matter how much darkness she had faced, the light inside her had never died, and now it was shining brighter than ever.